Another exciting new episode of Talking About Stoicism, where we were going over the Moral Letters by Lucius Annaeus Seneca. And we landed in letter 83, and I thought there was some interesting stuff to say about that. Letter 83 from Seneca to Lucilia's greetings. You tell me to describe every one of my days from start to finish. You must think well of me if you suppose there is nothing in them that I would hide from you. Our lives should indeed be like that, lived as if in the sight of others. Even our thoughts should be conducted as though some other person could gaze into our inmost breast. For there is someone who can. What use is there in keeping a secret from human beings? Nothing is hidden from God. God is in our minds. God enters into the midst of our thoughts. I say enters, as if he had ever left. So I will do as you tell me, and write to you willingly of what I am doing, all in order. I will observe myself straight away, and conduct an inquiry of my day. It's a very useful practice. What makes us terrible people is that no one looks back over his life. We ponder what we are about to do, though not as often as we should. We do not ever reflect on what we have done, yet plans for the future depend on the past. I think some interesting things are said here, and I'll try to refrain a bit from going into the whole theological aspect of what he's saying here, but I do think the main point raised is a valid one to think about. So, if you struggle with doing the right thing with Stoic practice, which depends largely on doing the right thing, being virtuous, if you find that difficult, if you find yourself struggling with that, what I has found can help is that specific practice, but you have to be a little careful with it. So what I mean by that specific practice is try to live as if someone is kind of looking over your shoulder. I'm not necessarily saying God, right? But I mean, imagine someone's looking over your shoulder. You can take a person that you find inspiring or that you find interesting, or you could even think of one of the Stoics, like think of Seneca, or who's a bit, who's a little eclectic, but maybe think of someone like Epictetus. Think about them looking over your shoulder every day, and think about them providing you with insights or giving comment on what you are doing. And I find that kind of process of what would X do in this situation can help you make better decisions. But on a higher level, if you continuously think about, what if my thoughts were privy to someone else? What if someone could see them or read them or know of them? That can help you also to do the right thing. I've said this a lot of times in these videos, and I don't want to keep giving the same examples, but Stoicism really requires you to practice very consistently. It really requires you to do the right thing all the time, and that's very, very difficult. It's difficult for human beings to do the right thing all the time. And that can even extend to small things, like should I tell this gossipy story to this colleague, for example? Well, Stoicism would say, no, you should not. You should not do that because that's not a virtuous thing to do. You shouldn't do that thing. Okay. Well then, if you struggle with doing that, which almost all of us do, because it's very easy and tempting to do that sort of thing, then think about that. What if Epictetus would be able to read my thoughts? Would he do this right now? And the answer is no, he would not. So I find that sort of thing can be helpful, but as I said, you have to be a little careful with that, because it can also lead to a sense of paranoia. What's too much, where you get sort of you get too caught up in that, where you sort of but now they know what I'm thinking, etc. And that is not a good thing either. So that's really something to do, I think, as an exercise once in a while, but make sure that there is balance in that you don't overdo it. Now, the second part of this particular letter that I found very interesting was where the second paragraph I read you. I'll observe myself straight away and conduct an inquiry of my day. It is a very useful practice. It is true that Seneca did this. He writes somewhere else that at the end of every day, lying in bed, he would go over all the things he had done that day, all the things that he had done well, but also all the things he had not done well, with the intention to learn from what had not gone well, so that in the future, if he would meet a situation like that again, he could handle it better. That, I think, is a very, very powerful reflective practice, and it takes a lot of effort and determination to keep doing that every day, but it can be very helpful. Helpful because you know there is one time of the day where you think about what has happened, what you have done, what you've not done, what you should have done, what you could have done, and then you can let it go, right? Okay, so this one thing keeps coming back to my mind because I don't think I did that particularly well. Well, if I'm going to think about that, it's one time, and maybe right before sleeping is not the best time to do that, but that one time of the day, maybe in the evening somewhere, I'll think about it and then I put it to rest. That, I think, can make it a lot easier to process something like that. And I also really like is what he says here. What makes us terrible people is that no one looks back over their life. We ponder what we are about to do, though it is not as often as we should. We do not ever reflect on what we have done. Yet plans for the future depend on the past. Well, I don't know if that is an entirely valid statement. I think a lot of people think about what they have done a lot, often too much. And as a result, they start to feel sad about things that they did wrong in the past. And if you're like me, then that could be something that can be a little hard to let go of. That you kind of keep going back to, and I should have done this, and then they said this, and I should have not said this, or I should not have done that, or I should have done X, Y, or Z. I'm sure this sounds familiar to a lot of you, because this is, I think, something that a lot of human beings do. We kind of go over the same things again and again. In a clinical context, we call that rumination, right? We ruminate. We keep going back to things. So I think his point is a good one. You should look back, but maybe in a controlled fashion. Like I said, maybe there is one point of the day where you allot time for you to think back to what you have done, or what you could have done a specific time of the day, or a specific event or whatever. But then you also let that go again. And I think that is a very good practice. I think the emphasis here should be on, but everything within reason. If you continuously look back at all the things you have done, should have done, could have done, and you truly live in the past, and I'm not saying anything profound here, I'm not the first person to say this, but that is an issue. If you only look ahead at the future and things that may happen that you're not even sure will happen, but that you have anxiety about because they could happen, that's not helpful either. So, Stoicism, I think, is a practice that advises you to stay firmly rooted in the here and now. But that doesn't mean you should never look back to see what you can improve on, what you can do better in the future. It also does not mean you should never look ahead, because then you're not prepared for what may come. The difficulty lies in striking that balance, and that balance is difficult. It's difficult to strike that. Some people are, and I'm making a sweeping generalization here, it's a lot more complicated than this, but some people look back at the past so much that they get depressed over everything they've done. That looking back does not evoke anxiety, that evokes depression, because you think about all the things you could have, should have, would have, etc. And if you look ahead into the future too much, well, then you get anxious because this could happen and that could happen and this may not happen, and that's a bad thing either. If you remain, again, rooted in the here and now, I'm not saying you won't be depressed, you won't have anxiety. Everybody feels bad some days and everybody has anxiety some days, but it might become a little bit less so than it would be if you continuously look back and continuously look forward. And I've touched on this kind of theme before, but I think it's important enough to reiterate once in a while. Try to stay here, but then give yourself time once in a while to look back, to see what you could do differently, realizing that the past is now the past and cannot be altered, and also occasionally look forward into the future. Think about what may happen, how you would handle that if or when it happens, but realize that nothing is immutable. Things are not necessarily guaranteed to happen because of the future. You can't predict the future. And in between is the here and now. And that's really all there is. We don't know. 10 seconds from now, the entire world may explode and we may all be gone because of some really cataclysmic event. Nope, still here. So that did not happen, so that's good. Now we'll move on, right? Okay. I hope this was useful. Yeah, I always think this is a good thing to remind yourself of once in a while. So I hope that was helpful for you as well. I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye.